Hi, I'm Amit,
And I'm Ankit.
and you're listening to Living Unbroken podcast,
Join us as we turn tragedy into empowerment.
exploring medicine, spirituality, politics, and all things accessibility. Hi, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing great today, Amit.
It would be great for our audience to know who are you and what is your mission and what do you do?
I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for having me on today. So where I come from is an organization called Neil Squire Society, and we are a 40-year-old nonprofit here in Canada, serving Canadians with disabilities through the use of technology. Everything we have on the table here today is from a program we call Makers Making Change, which is the program I run. But we have a number of different programs across our organization, everything covering employment services, training the skills and the technology you might need to become an accountant, for example, would be one of the areas of work that we have a lot of people in supporting Canadians looking for those new work opportunities. We have a whole solutions team, a number of occupational therapists that can work everything from ergonomics for anybody who's setting up a desk to someone maybe after an accident looking to find a new technology setup to continue doing the work that they've been doing, as well as a full hearing lab in our Burnaby office, which is one of the few or only Western Canadian hearing booths that can take a wheelchair inside, like fully immersed inside the sound booth. A lot of different interesting stories that go along with that. So, yeah.
The sound booth, like what is that? It's kind of like a music stereo or what is it?
Yeah, similar to that. So during, like if you go into a hearing lab and you're trying to maybe get some hearing aids fitted for yourself, there's a silent booth that you have to operate within, put some headphones on, and you're trying to get tested for the different frequencies that are being tested for to make sure that the hearing range is being matched to the device that's going to support that hearing down the road. And sometimes maybe it's just a headset, but being able to have a fully accessible sound booth so someone can go into this chamber and close the door, and then you have a perfectly silent room in order to do the hearing test. So you're not trying to, fit something that doesn't into a space that isn't big enough.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a important thing is having the size of a quiet booth like that to get good quality hearing results.
Yeah, I never heard about something like that before. What exactly is the Makers Change?
Yeah, Makers Making Change is a program of Neil Squire Society that is really focused on connecting makers, so volunteers in the community who have the skills to design and work with technology, with people who are looking for assistive technologies to do a job. So if I maybe have a little bit of difficulty pinching a pen, for example, I could find a different device, something like this, that would be able to go over top of my hand, and I don't even have to close my grip around it, and I can continue to write or make notes with a device like this, all based around desktop manufacturing. So we talk 3D printers, laser cutters, CAD, a lot of open software or CAD software to design these 3D models. And then for under $1 of plastic, we now have an assistive device made by someone in the community who's volunteered their time and their innovative thinking.
So tell us about the impact and the scale of what you're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So Makers Making Change started just over 8 years ago as a program, and that was really the time where 3D printers were showing up in schools, libraries. They were starting to kind of be everywhere, and it really opened up the opportunity to have like a distributed manufacturing opportunity. And that's where this whole idea came together, was how can we bring the cost of assistive technology down through volunteerism? So that's the core of it. At the beginning, it was a little bit slow to start. We started with actually a few versions ago of this device right here called the Lip Sync. And it is a mouth-operated joystick, so you can move the joystick around with your mouth, you can sip, and you can puff into the straw here, and that becomes left clicks and right clicks, so you can get access to a computer, a tablet, you can play your Xbox with it, for example, so it's a pretty full-functioning mouse alternative for someone who has the ability to operate it with only their mouth or their head movements.
You created that?
That came out of our program. That's actually where Makers Making Change started from, was won a Google Innovation Award to develop the first version of this device, and specifically for access to mobile tablets. Actually was one of the first targets, because they were becoming more and more available and very useful from an accessibility standpoint. But the idea, how can we get someone maybe who can't touch the screen to interact with these devices in an effective way? And that
we've had a guest on that show who was using it
Yeah, really.
while he was on the show with us.
That's fantastic. That's amazing to hear.
Yeah, but we didn't know that you had created this.
There's a few different versions out there. So whether it's this exact device or maybe one from adults,
There are alternatives that do the same thing as what this does.
there are some other alternatives. And the real magic behind this one is, again, utilizing the 3D printing and the volunteerism and hobby level electronics inside this device. So it's all powered off of like an Arduino board that you can buy off the shelf and program through just regular programming tools that are free to download. This price of this setup now is $250, where competing commercial versions start at kind of around the $1,000 range. So we're really trying to drive those costs away from even these complex electronic devices.
And so tell us about some of the other stuff that's here as well. And maybe talk about in general themes of this is, okay, this is an assistive tech for computers, but then I see other stuff here. Tell me, there's some entertainment stuff here and what other areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to break this down into a couple of categories. We have digital access being a big area of the work we do, and a few things fall into the digital access bucket. So everything from alternative mouse or keyboard inputs. So this would be like an alternative mouse. Same thing here. We have a joystick, and that could be, again, used as an alternative mouse. So that can actually go onto a PC, for example, and someone could use that instead of trying to drive the mouse around the table. And then assistive switches. This is another huge category for us. These various size switches. I think we have about 23 different versions of switches now in our library of different sizes, forces, ways of triggering a switch. And they're very important because this, again, as we get to digital access, while we have an adapted toy that maybe spins around and makes some lights for us, the first step for a lot of kiddos getting started with this and their first steps towards digital access start with this switch. When I press the button, something happens. And really reinforcing that repetition and understanding that button and then something happens. Well, now all of a sudden I go forward in time. I'm getting used to that. I can unplug this from my toy and I can plug it into my computer now, and I press the button and I now just clicked a link, or I've scanned the internet and I have access to all of the knowledge without having to do anything more than press one button. We add a second button, I can do it faster. And then there's different ways of progressing these skills through time. So for us, this is one of the most popular combinations we have is a toy with a switch, because they can be quite expensive. So this setup that we have, roughly $10 for the switch, and toys can be anywhere from $10 to $45, we'll say, typically, depending how complex these toys are. Competing or the commercial versions of this tend to start at about $150 just for the toy. The switches can be anywhere from $50 to $100 each as well. Lots of good reasons why that is. But as a volunteer organization utilizing essentially, volunteers donating their time, those costs don't have to go into these and they don't have to be recaptured. So that is the real magic. And that is really beneficial because many families simply can't afford that $150 or $200 for a toy and a switch. So the kiddo has a chance with their occupational therapist, maybe once a week, to practice these skills, and they go away. And that time to get to that, what I like to call the digital access point, where I'm now scanning the internet effectively, is delayed because I only get to practice so much. But if I can take a toy home with me, I get to practice way more often. I'm also having a lot of fun. So, life's just a little bit better because I get to play with the same toys as my friends have. And I think that's a really important part, right? The play aspect of learning is huge.
So again, we're talking about the scale and impact a little bit.
Right.
Maybe, tell us how many people, how many toys, how many kinds of toys, the categories. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sounds great. Scale is actually one of those weird ones because we give everything away for free. I think that's an important point to make here. And when I say give everything away for free, the knowledge, the design files, all of the instructions on how to build these, you can download on our website without having to pay anything. So anybody around the world can actually download and build these things. And we actually don't know that that's happening a lot of the time. So we've seen things on social media popping up of people talking about different devices like, hey, that's pretty neat. Someone in Japan and number of people around the world now using these different devices. So that's the first kind of idea. As a Canadian organization with a Canadian mandate, when we checked our website, we've reached over 35 countries around the world with people visiting, downloading, signing up for accounts. The majority of our actual work happens in Canada and actually the US as well. There's a really big demand south of the border for a lot of the work we have. So we actually have chapters who will participate, not really connected to our organization, but they're representing the idea that open source assistive technology like this is available, and they're skilled in order to deliver it to their local communities as well. So this is sort of the ability to travel is quite free. That's the idea behind this. We've really created a system that is easy to move digital information around the world with limited barriers into accessing that information. Now, in terms of impact inside Canada, the stuff that we have sent out, we can measure. So we have now sent just over 19,000 pieces of assistive technology, which could be a pen holder, Could be a switch, it could be a toy, it could be a lip sync. Each of those counts as one for us. And we've delivered those out over the last 8 years of our time. And part of this has been a really interesting journey in the last few years. We've developed a STEM education arm of our program now. We call it STEM with Purpose. And the idea is every one of these design projects that we had on our website was a ready-made STEM project. So someone would be able to understand how do I have to do the electronics? How do I do the code? How do I actually assemble this device now and do the soldering and build this thing into a finished product? And then we have the volunteer element, which is volunteerism, meaning I've now built this and it's going to somebody else in the community. It's not just for my own personal consumption. So this is the real magic now on that has been, it's just been unbelievably how fast that has grown. We've now just over 20,000 students across Canada have participated in build events with us and STEM education sessions through high schools, elementary schools. I was actually at an elementary school yesterday teaching a couple of classes. We did some soldering with a grade 5 class. We made a bunch of these actually yesterday with a grade 2 and 3 class. So, you don't have to be a high school technology student. You can be pretty much anybody to get engaged with these ideas.
So anybody who has an open mind and has the idea to start building things, you can come and volunteer in your organization or no?
Yeah, we do a few different things. We don't, because of how distributed and how far apart we are, we do have volunteers who will come into our office and work with us, and that's fantastic. We love having those people join us and help out by, testing devices after we do a big event. A lot of what we do is actually event-based. So before the holidays in November, we held a big holiday hackathon is what we called it at Brentwood Mall. And we had just under 300 volunteers come out over the day, and we built just over 500 pieces of assistive technology that we then delivered to families in time for the holidays. All of that was donated out to the community. We had lots of support from our corporate partners and our various funders to help make all those parts get together and not have to charge anybody to recover those costs. And so we had everybody come out. We had a great time, and that was a public event. So that was one that we tried something that big for the first time. It worked extremely well. We were actually sold out very early, and it was fun because we got to watch, if someone canceled their ticket, it was like instant that someone would pick it up and sign on to that and rebook that ticket. So again, the tickets were free. We just needed that because we had schedules to organize our volunteers. But we're going to try to do a bit more of that kind of open activity for our communities as well. But otherwise, bring us into your school. If your teachers want to bring us into your classroom, your universities, that example. And we have a couple new programs, and maybe I'll save that for a little bit later on here. But why don't we keep going?
So when you send it across the border, with the current situation, I'm going to book you. So, are you charging a tariff on them?
Great question. This is one line.
5 or 30%?
I appreciate the question. It is very relevant. It's one line we actually can't cross. So we are not allowed as an organization. Our mandate is Canada, and actually we are restricted from shipping anything outside of Canada, really, and across the U.S. border for a few different reasons that go along with the organization, which is why we have those chapters in the U.S. who will be doing all that building for us down there, so we don't have to cross that border. It's also expensive.
So they basically download the file.
That's right.
And they make it.
Yeah. So someone
you should have a tariff on that one.
So, tariff on free, downloads is you're not going to get very much out of that one.
The season of tariff is going. That's all I figured out. We should figure out a tariff season too. I know, I can see on the table the Xbox accessibility remote. And that remote was designing it. The Microsoft Canada office here in Vancouver, I was part of it. And they used to do a testing on us and trying to figure out how the accessibility remote they were making. Because in the past, since that remote came out, there was nothing. So I know the PlayStation 5 has it. Have you worked as PlayStation 5 remote accessibility on it or not yet?
Yeah, so we first of all, accessible gaming and the Xbox adaptive controllers, absolutely, to pun it a little bit, an absolute game changer to the space. So getting into gaming is really important in my opinion. It's an industry that's 3 or 4 times larger than Hollywood as far as entertainment goes. So it's a very important part of our culture. So the idea to make that accessible and very easily accessible is a fantastic idea. And this device has made the idea that you can take any switch that has this sort of 3.5 millimeters standard assistive switch switch, and you can plug it in the back, and all of a sudden you have an A button that is now this big button or this smaller button. You don't have to go through the software. You don't have to do anything else. It makes it very easy and much more accessible, or less barriers, we'll call it, to getting gaming started. We work with a number of things. So we've worked obviously a lot with Xbox, PC as well. This works very well on a PC. There's some adapters that we started using for things like the Nintendo products. Sony obviously has come out with their accessible controller, and we're getting used to trying to work with a few things on that as well. And this dovetails really nicely into another part of our program that has developed within about the last 18 months, which is our adapted gaming program, or something we call our game checkpoints. And that really evolved out of exactly the question you were asking is, hey, can I play this game? Like, is this possible? And what do I need to do that? And we realized that there was a question that was, what does it take for someone to get into gaming for the first time if they can't hold on to a standard controller? And that was really what started our creation around this new program. And since that time, Tyler on our team has been a fantastic proponent, gamer himself. He's really led the charge for us on this side of our programming and come up with a lot of educational resources for users to be able to get into gaming and understand, how do I get into gaming, and how do I get into, the gaming that works the best for me and the types of games that I want to play. There's a wide range of different styles of gaming, everything from one button up to that, multi-button joystick kind of platform, first-person shooter style game that can be quite complex. So,
and you can do all of that through 3D printing, designing, and everything on it, or
you can. There's
you have a lot of equipment,
lots of different joysticks, button options. That's really what we're talking about, is being able to have the different input devices. If you can connect it into a controller like this one or the one from Sony, or kind of on.
But no software changes required in the gaming or the console. They're literally changing just the hardware piece that interacts with the computer or the device.
Yeah, that is the kind of the baseline of what we try to do. You can also use a lot of accessibility features that are getting built into the games now. So a lot of studios are building in additional accessibility features, which are really powerful. High contrast modes, slow speed modes. So the idea again, so if you take the small controllers designed for reaction times that are very, very small, but if now I'm having to move a hand from much larger distances, that gaming experience isn't going to be as fun for me, because I can't move as fast if I'm only moving that far with my thumb versus this far with my arm. So I can change the speed of the game so it's a much better relationship between the button here to the button there, and I'm having that same level of experience with the game now.
Well, we had another guest on the podcast, and she talked about how a lot of the accessibility features that are created for the disabled community are actually good features for everybody. Case in point, in real world, when you're going into doors, how many times people press the button to leave that door open?
That's right.
Closed captioning, text messaging. Those are all texts and features that were created in the real world for people with disabilities, but are actually good features for everybody to have, right? And I think in gaming too, especially, like we grew up with a lot of gaming in our household. We would have all our cousins over. We'd be up all night playing video games on TV. And then, as we got older, also, not just older, but, with Amit's accident and his change in his conditions, kind of lost gaming in the family, and being able to bring that back. And as we age, because when we were younger, like my parents did not grow up with video games, but I did. Right. And as I get older, I still want to be able to play those video games, but my reaction times and my ability to, understand what's going on the screen and then the games are changing fast, that I think some of those accessibility features are actually good for average folks like us as well. And so have you thought about what can we, because I know you give everything away, but maybe there's a component here. We're both business owners. We're trying to think about, well, this is amazing stuff that you're creating. I know that it's nice to give it away to people who need it, but maybe there are companies who don't need it, but are actually, can use it to improve what they're doing. So they can they're monetizing the feature in their whatever, whether it's the console and or the game that they're selling. So they should pay a portion of that, So I wonder if this can be packaged with the actual controllers and or the game consoles that you buy. You shouldn't have to go out of your way to get it, right? It can be something that ships along with the game and or the console. right? And then we can monetize that.
Yeah, interesting idea. And there's a little bit of work, trying to create that concept of the kit. Actually, we've just started the development actually around this of creating what we call an accessible gaming kit. And we have 3 different versions of this kit, really targeted actually less, a little bit less at the user, although very usable potentially, but more at manufacturers and game studios to provide their designers with the actual hardware that people will be using so they can actually help design games to actually work better with assistive technologies and assistive switches and joysticks, for example. Because that's often a barrier as well. It's just the awareness of game design,
right?
Just understanding like what is the experience a user is having in the community of this game. So that's a big part of that for us is, again, creating a package of like, what could this look like? I think the challenge on our side with some of these things, and by the way, there are definitely commercial versions of products out there. Microsoft actually has this device, and that is an at-cost device. They do cost recovery on it, but they're not trying to have the same margins they would have on like their Xbox platform, for example, right? They're trying to promote the accessibility side much the same way that we are. And the challenge with the standard kit, just like a standard piece of assistive technology, is that it's usually going to get you pretty close maybe to what you want, but it's probably not exactly what's right for you. There's so much customization that comes down, even with, whether you're an able-bodied gamer or an adaptive gamer. Everybody wants to customize to sort of the nth degree on their systems as they get more and more advanced. So something like this, while we could provide, that as a standard option, we actually have a whole range of toppers for this joystick. So different ways your hand might sit on top of the joystick that is more comfortable, and those can even be further customized. So the idea being that we actually want to create a more, semi-standardized but customized features that allow it to be really tailored to your experience and how you want that to work.
Yeah, and I really do think that gaming needs to be more accessible, not just to people with disabilities, but accessible across multi-generations, right?
Absolutely.
I'd love to be able to play a video game with my mom or dad one day, right? But it's a big barrier for them, the typical learning curve for a video game, and the response times needed, the ability to understand what's happening on the screen at the speed that it's happening at. It gets harder for people as they age, It's one of the things we talked about with one of the guests as well, is if you live long enough, you will be disabled at one point in your life. If not,
a fully able body is a temporary experience, right?
Right.
I think that's a good insight.
Yeah. And so I know you worked in not-for-profit. You work in a not-for-profit now, but you've come from for-profit background.
That's right.
For many years. But this has been a long time for you in a not-for-profit. What's the shift you've changed in the organizational culture and your role yourself? What has attracted you to this? And what do you think there's something to be learned from the other side on both ends?
Absolutely. Great question, actually. This is a fun one I've thought about over the years as well. So as my background as a mechanical engineer and then as a business leader, over time, I've developed sort of a number of teams and worked with a number of organizations and products in various spaces. So a lot of industrial background working in business to business sales and supporting those kinds of products to utilities across North America.
Like actual sales, you were in sales roles.
I've been everything from design to production and manufacturing to sales and support to new markets. I mean, I've really kind of traveled. That's one of my things is I like to do something new and really learn as I go through time. So it's been a lot of different roles and everything from organizational design as well. So setting up like what is the structure of the team and how are we going to support that team in order to do the job that we're trying to do, which is really what brought me into Makers Making Change ultimately. So I was working in an engineering consulting firm at the time. We had some really interesting projects, and it was a controls engineering firm. So not something I was going to be doing the design work on as a mechanical engineer. That's very electrical and software engineering focused. But I had a really good connection and understanding of the technology as well as what the customer needs were, which is how I found myself into helping build the sales team in that capacity. So that was a really interesting role for me where I built on some of my previous work in the utility sector and helping, again, justify and provide insight into the value of products as they apply to a business and coming up with business cases. And that was really the biggest part of my job. Wasn't so much, I enjoy sales, but I've always been more of the how can I consult to help your business work better. That's what sales is to me. I'm not trying to push a product on you or try to create a transaction. I want us to have business together for a very long time. And that's been my training and my background. And then I actually started volunteering with Makers Making Change for it was over a year anyway before they started getting a lot of attention. There's a lot of growth that was required within the program, and the team I knew quite well, and they were amazing. And the organization, the mission is something I'm passionate about as well. And I just said, it just seems like a lot of fun. So it seemed like I had the right mix of skills to bring into the organization to help really set this team up, both from an engineering and technical standpoint, as well as a growth and, we'll call the marketing end of.
Yeah, you said you were passionate about where's the passion coming from?
My background and really the reason I got into engineering in the first place is I wanted to utilize technology to enhance the society or really support people. I'm very much a people first kind of a person. You can call me a bit of an oddball as an engineer if you want, because a lot of engineers, the extrovert will look at your shoes instead of their own shoes. But for myself, I've always enjoyed spending time with people, and the idea that connecting with technology to enhance whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's safety or in this case assistive technology, is the idea that someone can go and have a better life, or they can avoid an accident in their day-to-day job, is something where if I can contribute to that, that's what turns me on in the morning. I get switched on with that kind of thinking. So it was really natural fit to think about assistive technology. And I was brand new to this space when I started volunteering. So this, both the nonprofit space and the idea of assistive technology, is an evolution, we'll call it, for my own technical background and understanding, how these pieces fit together. So I've reflected on this a few times. So as a leader, it's actually been a very interesting journey, because it's incredibly difficult. Actually, I had to rethink how I consider business casing, both because of the nonprofit side of things, because all of a sudden, you're not levering on the idea that if this, then that, and this is what the inputs are, and we have to have more outputs that come back to us. So this is a really easy business case to make. Well, now we're looking at a problem from a social impact factor, and the idea that we have very limited inputs. We're probably not getting anything back from those inputs except for social value. And now how do we measure that social value? And how do we say this is a good project or this is a project we want to avoid? So
now you only get the stickers. You don't get the money.
Yeah, well, it's...
You know what? It's a good resume, Ankit. You're always looking for a sales guy, so you know who to contact now.
There you go. Yeah, and that's the idea, right? So where is that value? And then putting all the pieces together in a way that actually creates a system that has sustaining capacity.
Like, do you ever get a competition where the business owners who are building these products were selling across the world, not in Canada, but the United States and Mexico, or Spain, or Europe, in United Kingdom? Did they ever question you, like, why are you giving all this stuff free?
I say nothing quite as direct as that. We have, been in a few meetings where there's been business owners who, are in a similar space, and there's actually a high mark for me when we were getting pointed out as a challenging element of the organization of assistive technology in the marketplace, meaning that we're actually getting some attention. So that was really kind of an interesting opportunity. It was negative in their context, but from my perspective, it means we're actually moving the needle a little bit.
Right.
So, I'm not going to point any fingers on any of these things, but it is, we are getting noticed. We're aware in the industry, and as makers making change has evolved over the last number of years, we're actually starting to hear people talk about, this idea of DIY technology or open source assistive technology as being a really meaningful part of that supply chain. And that is important, I think, to consider when we have these kind of commercial versus, not-for-profit, is we're serving important spectrums within that supply chain. So I never want to see, for example, one of our volunteer-made buttons operating a power chair, for example, or an emergency call button. We just don't have the control over the manufacturing quality that's required to guarantee that device is going to work 100% of the time in that application. But if we're playing a video game and the button happens to stop working, it's inconvenient, right? It is a safe to fail situation.
No, but that could be a one guy shot and he would get on a 25 swearing from the other partners. How did he die on that game? But, I think so, the assistive technology is innovative, and I feel, like, do you ever thinking about bringing the assistive technology in manufacturing of cars or something like that?
I think there's, a lot, we'll call broadly speaking. I am also very passionate about a concept called universal design. The concept being that we can design a device that has the ability to be suitable for any number of users, not just the model user or the majority user in a bell curve, if you think of it that way. So how then can we create devices from the very beginning of the design cycle that include things for accessible use? That idea that I don't have to go buy a special product, it's just the product. So that's an area that is, there's a lot of momentum around it. It's become a popular topic. It's been around for a very long time. But the idea is that it's becoming more and more present as we talk more and more about accessibility in the social arenas. The more we can do, it brings the cost down for everybody. So all of a sudden, if I'm only building 100 of these mouth-operated mice, that's a very expensive cost structure to across a very small number of products. But if we have something else out there that actually we can utilize the same technology pieces, well, all of a sudden I have a market of 1 million and I'm using majority components from that, the cost comes way down. And that's sort of what we've been trying to accomplish here by using prefabricated microcontrollers and very accessible software, that we're just using something inside of these devices that is generally available to everybody. Any maker out there will use it to turn on their fancy lights, to build their jacket that, for Halloween costumes, we've also used to create this mouth-operated mouse.
So is Makers Making Change unique in the world, or are there others that do similar things around the world?
Yeah, great. Actually, really great question. Yeah, there's a few organizations out there that do very similar work to what we do. And it's, I think, a really important collaborative space. And that's one thing I've really liked about working in this open assistive technology space, is it is so collaborative, because we all need to work together and we still can't fulfill the demand. So it is, a lot less of that hard competitive, us versus you. It's how can we work together across these different communities? So organizations like Tom Global is a group out of Israel, very present in the US as well. They have a lot of open technology development platforms. They partner with universities and have fellowships that are focused on creating accessible design or accessible devices. A lot of promotion on that side, very similar to the types of products we have at Makers Making Change. In fact, we have some of their stuff on our website that people can download and request through our fulfillment processes. Enable.org was another one that really focused on maker-made prosthetics, for example, and kind of the list and kind of keep going on from there. AT Makers is another group that we partnered with a long time ago, based out of the US. Depending on funding, all of us kind of ebb and flow and how active we are over time. And that's one of the challenges we face in the nonprofit world, is maintaining a consistent funding structure, because going back to the commercial versus non-commercial or nonprofit, is no matter what type of business we're in, money is the gas in the tank that makes the car go forward. No matter how good the car is, if there's no gas in the tank, we're not going anywhere. So we got to keep that process going, which is a big part of our fundraising, is finding ways to have that consistency over time. How do we smooth out some of those peaks and valleys?
And so these are the not-for-profit organizations that do that. That's right. Are there for-profit entities that do similar things, or do they kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of this, think of the open source assistive technology style of work that we do with 3D printing and all of that as being sort of the new kids on the block. So there's a lot of long-time commercial assistive technology manufacturers out there, everything from the folks who make power chairs and wheelchairs all the way up to assistive switches and key guards, for example. There's people out there doing all of these things, and the costs that go with them because of the small markets are higher. And often that, while it's completely justified, means that some people just simply don't have access to that technology simply because of the cost. And that is really why we exist. Is our mission is removing cost as a barrier. That is the core of our mission at Makers Making Change. So really creating that opportunity for someone who, well, I can't afford that, so I have nothing. Well, I can't afford that, but hey, maybe there's something over here that a volunteer made for me that maybe doesn't do everything that does, but does enough. And I can do something with it for a lot less expense.
So do you get a lot of engineers who would like to volunteer all the time in lieu of core?
Yeah, we have a lot of different people who actually like to volunteer. So, everything from, your high school student who's just getting started with the ideas of technology. Had actually a retired engineer who's been working with us as a dedicated volunteer for quite a long time. And sort of everything in between. But I would say that anybody involved in technology latches onto this idea very quickly. It's very easy to see the benefit. If I invest my time, is it going to have an impact? And it's very easy to see that connection. It's the same thing that drew me in as a technologist, is that idea that I want to apply the skill, but I don't just want to give it random time. I think I have some skills that can add additional value than just, hammering a nail, for example. Although I do enjoy hammering nails, I shouldn't, bad example. But the idea there is that, there's additional, high-skilled or skill-based volunteerism as well. And that's really how this ties into technology folks. The really neat thing I like is that we actually have a lot of bankers, and I pick on the bankers a little bit, but they're very engaged. So people who have never even heard of the soldering iron before, and we'll do events with them as a corporate, engagement point. So they do a staff building event. They want to bring their team together, do something a little bit different. They bring us in as both a good source of revenue for us from a donation standpoint. We bring all the tools, all of the materials. We train everybody on how to do this stuff. And we have a fun sort of couple of hours together. And we build a bunch of devices. And we teach people who have never picked up a soldering iron or heard of a 3D printer. And they've built and they have actually functionally created these devices that are being donated to the community. So all that is just part of some of the things you do. So yeah, you don't have to be a technologist. You can be anybody who's just, like you said earlier, has an open mind and willing to try.
And Justin, I know you have a dog in the family, right?
I absolutely do, yeah.
How big is it?
Lucy is 65 pounds. She's a cross between a Whippet and a Dutch Shepherd. So think of she's kind of got tiger stripes. Think of a shepherd that is a little bit more lean, like a greyhound. And that's kind of where Lucy fits into the picture.
So if you get a chance to become an animal, and which one you gotta choose?
Oh,
Don't tell me the dog now because you have a dog.
that is quite the question after that saying it. That's funny. So I've always kind of gravitated towards sort of birds. You know, I'm not sure I could give you the specific bird. Everybody wants to do the bird of prey because they're, popular food chain stuff. But I think a bit of it is the idea that I like to move between ideas quickly, and I like the idea of bouncing around. I also love the idea of flight. So that's I'd be somewhere in sort of like medium size. Not a small bird. I don't think I'd be a golden eagle. I'm not on that spectrum. But
I don't know.
flying high is fun, but the idea of seeing a bunch of different places very quickly, like having that concept is really attractive. And
Try to find you the faster.
yeah, so something small and quick probably would be
Take it like for your dog too.
yeah, like the
Fastest animal in the world, right? People don't know. They think, a lot of people think it's a tiger,
yeah.
but it's actually a peregrine falcon, narrow falcon.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, so I think that would be a good word, right?
Yeah.
It's a quick and small, right?
So they're not heated. That's right.
Not big, yeah. It's a medium-sized bird.
Yeah, I'd 100% if I could be a peregrine falcon, that'd be a ton of fun immediately. Yeah.
Well, who's gonna do that then?
Yeah, exactly. We get the lot we're given, right? So they get to go have their fun diving out of the sky, and I'll work on a 3D printer.
I always think the technology is the fastest thing for being a disabled, for me to grow much more. And so right now, AI is in our hands, in our smartphone. It's carrying everything in our hand. And, I look at my son now, he doesn't have to go anywhere. He has a Cosmo in his hand. Now, with the AI, how AI is going to be helpful for you?
Great question. We're figuring that out. I think everybody is in that space of trying to understand how AI is really going to impact our structures. But I think, at the very basic level, we're already utilizing some of these tools to help us do software development, for example, Copilot and a few of those other AI software tools that help, check your code or even create some ideas on how you might write code to do certain jobs, speeds up those processes. We had actually a very effective software developer on our team, was unable to use a keyboard and was able to utilize a bunch of these software tools to enable web development. So that was a type of tool set that really improved his ability to actually do the job. And so that's a few different ways AI is going to impact us. I think, broadly, the accessibility of AI and how AI, processes information is the black box is always a bit challenging for people to digest. And I think time will tell where all of this lands. I don't know that we know that answer yet, ultimately, in the social fabric of how AI will affect society. I'm hopeful. Again, there's a lot of promise inside many of these AI tools, and they've been around for a long time. They're commercial forms. They're a public asset through ChatGPT and Notebook LM, and it's on and on. If we want to get into all these new models that just keep coming out, there's the rapid sort of wild west of technology happening right now, and we'll see. There's a lot of people. We're having the questions on, when social media came out, were we safe enough? Did we move in a thoughtful enough way? Or is it being completely commercially driven to serve commercial purposes? And are we forgetting about the impacts on society, right? And this is where I love this kind of conversation, is because this is a day unknown. And how are we going to apply our values to it? How should we apply our values to it in certain circumstances? And what values do we apply if we say yes? So there's a lot of ethics that have to go into this conversation. And I think our experiences through the social media journey as a society have
really brought people to pay attention this time around. Well, we'll see how effective policy ultimately is, because the speed of government versus the speed of a tech company always be a little bit disparate. So there's a challenge that goes with it. But I think there's a lot of very active conversations on the social side of this as well.
Are you a fan of the podcast?
We created a safe space for members of the community to discuss topics in accessibility, seek help, and exchange resources to make life better.
Join our inclusive community by emailing us at livingunbroken.org@gmail.com.
So we were talking about the transition from profit to not-for-profit. You were an engineer. I know you've done an executive MBA.
Yeah.
And, so you have a very, unconventional career path, I would say. And, we have a lot of young people in the audience who are watching this, and they're maybe inspired by what you've been able to accomplish in your career. And whether or not they're with a disability or not, what advice would you give to your younger self? And is there any books or podcasts or anything that you would recommend that these people go into to maybe develop a path like yours? Or so two questions here. One, advice that you would give yourself to your younger self, and then any advice for younger people in the audience that you may have.
Yeah, great. I think I'm going to, the first we'll call piece of advice to anybody who's curious or interested in technology is kind of just go for it. There's so many resources now and so many opportunities to just try something. And then if you don't like it, that's okay, right? But there's so many times, especially with what we do at the high school and elementary school level, when we teach someone to solder, scared of this hot iron, and all of a sudden the lights go on. Can I do more? I love melting metal. Oh my God, that is so much fun. So the idea that, you don't necessarily have to have like super crazy good math skills. You have to have some competence, of course, in math in the engineering side of things. It's a very big part of what we do. But if you're good with math, you have a good sense of physics. I'll tell you the story of how I got into engineering around this one, because I didn't have a clue. When I first started, I went to university and I had two focuses. I was going to go into economics, or I was going to go into astronomy. I ended my first year. I didn't want to do either of those things, and realized very quickly that wasn't sort of the path for me. I was not really that pure scientist, researcher especially at that point in time. I like doing things and making things real. So I went and actually talked to a counselor at the university and said, like, what can I do if I want to keep going in school? What might be better for me than these two things? Because I know I don't like this. And the question back is, you ever thought of doing engineering? And my response was, what's engineering? Really, I was really clueless at the time. So I got explained, and then, said, can I get into civil engineering? This was my first spot. And they said, oh no, there's a really long wait list in the civil program. I said, oh, too bad. I guess that's not going to work out. And well, have you thought about mechanical engineering? I was like, oh, what's mechanical engineering? And the counselor at this point had caught on to all this stuff. I had pretty good math and physics and sort of those things. I just didn't have the examples out there of people I knew that were engineers. So I didn't really understand the model of what this career path looked like. And her response to me was, do you like cars? I said, yeah, I love cars. That's really great. And do you think you would like maybe doing the things that are involved in designing a car? And I said, yeah, that's mechanical engineering. I'm like, oh, sign me up. So it was signed up. My first 2 weeks in the program, very difficult. It's a big transition. There's a lot of work you have to do in the engineering trading side of things, but I loved it. As soon as I got in, I knew I'd found the right place. But I never would have gotten there. If I was not talking to somebody else, never would have found my way into engineering. So that was sort of the journey into the concept of what engineering is connecting that passion I have for technology and understanding that and making things real in the real world. So it's the application side of science. And that's where I found my, now moving forward in the career, how, going beyond that is, again, keep talking to people is probably the out of that story. The big one for me is, as a young person, I was always a little bit creative, a little bit aloof, maybe is another term, just kind of in my own little world a lot of the times thinking. And I also remember that my parents like to tell a story around how my sister used to tutor me in math in middle school, and how all of a sudden I got into this engineering program, and their question to me was, are you sure? And, I had evolved, obviously. I'd become better at math since, the
Don't want to do it anymore.
yeah, so I was able to do things, and I did quite well in the programs after the fact. But it wasn't that I was the best math student out there. I was, call average in the engineering program from the math side, but I had a real strong aptitude for design and analysis, and that's a big part of the work. So that was something that I found really a lot of fun with, and it made me really want to work hard at those other parts of where I'm not quite as strong. You're not going to be good at everything, and I think that's important. Engineering is a very broad profession,
And you can do so many different things with it that it's worth just, seeing what parts of it you like.
And you also have an executive MBA though, so that's very business focused. I mean, it kind of seems odd that you would do engineering and then you would do a business degree, or maybe that's not something I'm aware of. But tell me about that.
Yeah, this is one where like an MBA program, a Master's of Business Administration, is a really nice combination to have with a technical.
An executive MBA though. So
that's right. So executive MBA is really like you've been in a job for a while. You probably have some skills. You've done a bunch of stuff. So we're going to tailor the coursework to someone who's actually experienced a lot of things as a leader in business already. So it's a bit more of like the recognizing that you have experience coming into this MBA program versus somebody who is just starting from a different university and going straight into the business training without any sort of real world experience. And that's really what the executive part means. Plus, they also tailor the program so that you can keep working while you go through this formal training. And that was a lot of fun. Actually, I enjoyed it. So it was always kind of on my list of things that I wanted to do. And having the journey I had through my career, starting at a very technical level, actually really started with Cal Tire and their mining group. And I was an assistant and an area manager there, working with the heavy haul equipment, all like the 2-story tall tires and all of that kind of stuff, and making,
for those mining trucks.
For the mining trucks, that's right. Trying to figure out how can we make those tires last a little bit longer? How do we remove heat from the tires and do those kind of things? So that was part of my job back then. And then I moved on to a very technical role where we started developing this pressure sensor that went inside transformers for power companies. And a very technical role. And then started.
So I'm agreed for transformers that, like power transformers, you get sensors on them to see if they.
That's right. The little gray cans up on the poles, the little green pads on the ground. We have a sensor in pretty much all of them. Any new transformer that BC Hydro uses, but most utilities across Canada and the US are now utilizing these sensors.
So you're part of that team that came up with that and did that?
I came onto the team. I wasn't one of the original inventors of the device. I came onto the team that it was a very early stage company, and the product had just started kind of going out, and there were some challenges with how things were going on, so they needed more engineering help. I was looking for a really, really meaty engineering problem because I really wanted to finish my apprenticeship, and it just kind of worked out. And I got in, and my first job was to solve this problem of getting this device safely through a manufacturing process of those transformers, so it wasn't damaged on the other side, because we have a sensitive device and we have a very old manufacturing style of these transformers, which is fast. They process fast. They change pressures really fast. And our device was not at a spot to handle those really rapid pressure changes and still be sensitive at the other end.
So mining truck tires to transformers for power utilities.
That's right.
And sensors for them. And then
onto work with
having Xbox.
Well, you did sales as well. Yeah, you built a sales team for
an engineering consulting firm here in Vancouver as well. So did that, and that's actually where I got connected in with Makers Making Change and started volunteering for just over a year before I joined the team, and had a lot of fun ever since. In the last 5.5 years, working and leading the Makers Making Change program and team across Canada.
So with the kind of the business hat on, if there was someone who was in our audience interested in, there's a lot of people who see problems when it comes to disability, things that people with disability cannot do. There's also things they can do, and there are opportunities for entrepreneurs to tap into. Can you maybe briefly mention some that you come to mind to you for here?
Sure. I think, we'll kind of jump back to the gaming market. If you think of a business and the business is in we're trying to create experiences and create value that is worth trading your money for, right? That's the end goal of any business. Not-for-profit is a little bit different in a mix and a different beast, but the idea of entrepreneurship in the space of accessibility or assistive design, or universal design, frankly, is probably the best one, where you have this market of people who are relatively excluded from many products. So the opportunity, and that I see a lot of opportunity in anyway, is this concept where if you can integrate your devices to more easily be either adapted to the final mile for a person with a disability, you have an untapped market that you have zero competition effectively with for your device. And it doesn't have to be a free device, right? Everybody is out there. We have different means, and the same sort of spectrum would apply to people with disabilities as well. We're just, like anybody else we all want to work. We want to buy things. We want to have fun with our lives. We want to play Xbox. We want to, cook in the kitchen. There's all manner of products. And then, all it means is sometimes there's an adaptation required for someone to use your existing base product. Or can I design in a method where that adaptation is built in so that we can create options for people as just a standard part of the offer. And going back to another comment you made earlier is maybe I was really good at cooking with a chef's knife when I was younger, and now my hands are a little bit sore as I get older. Maybe I have a bit of arthritis in my hands and I can't quite squeeze the knife the same way. Maybe I can have the adaptive handle, and that's exactly where the company like Oxo, they have these large grip kitchen utensils, and that's really the core of it, is the idea that they're actually designed for people with an adaptive background, but it's a really successful kitchen company, and I use their tools too because some of them are very good. Right. So it's, this idea out there, the thinking through all of these things as you would a product manager or a business leader. What is the size of the market? What is the cost of servicing that market? And is there an opportunity and enough value to say that I can service this market and create a viable business and pay for all of the costs I have to pay for, plus my profit, which is the whole reason I'm going to do the thing in the first place, because I don't work for free. Everybody has groceries. We all have to pay for our power bills, and we all have to find a way to generate revenue. Even in a nonprofit, we all have to find ways to cover the costs of us being on the planet. So there's just different ways of doing that, and one isn't better than the other, in my opinion. Having been on both sides, they present different challenges, different ways of thinking through the problem set. But at the end of the day, we look at the inputs, we look at the work we have to do, and what are the outputs we're trying to generate, and then how do we create that equation so we have a net positive, and then away you go.
So how many things are you making assistive for your wife at home?
I haven't done a whole lot on the assistive side for my wife at home, but we have done a number of different projects on various, like holding up we had to make a modification for our shower enclosure because it didn't fit the space properly. So I had to, ended up 3D printing a few different shims for different spots to make that actually, we almost had to take it back, but with a little bit of thinking and very simple 3D printing, actually, we were able to utilize a very nice shower, and the enclosure is great, and it's been there for over a decade now and no problems. So simple ideas. It doesn't, necessarily have to be just this work. I still think about a lot of different ideas, so kind of all the time.
So if you become the leader of this country, and right now we have a space, so, and your resume looks pretty interesting. So what are the change you're going to bring in?
I think there's been a lot of good advocacy and a lot of work towards bringing the accessibility portfolio forward in the last couple of years. There's still a lot of room, I would say, on that as well, in creating more programs, more accessibility broadly as part of our, we'll call our DNA of city building, community building, social manufacturing, if you want, of the different ways we have programs available to people, how they, we require people to access buildings and all those elements. I think there's still a lot of advocacy work left to do. And, broadly speaking, in a social context is, while, there are a lot of different spectrums of income for people with disabilities, broadly speaking, a lot of people with disabilities fall either at or below the poverty line in a much higher proportion than we'll call public at large. So that would be a really core area that I'd like to address as well. To be clear, I'm not trying to be prime minister, but that is, I don't think...
There's a position available right now. They're looking for it too. So we already record your podcast. So
we're ready.
We're going to something like resume. Okay, so just remember that. That position is going to be available for you to take it.
Yeah, there is definitely something to be said about the economic reality of people with disabilities. And, Canada, especially BC, I would say it's probably better than, if not the best in the world for that. I mean, you travel anywhere, third world or even many other countries, and including places like our downtown east side, vast majority of homelessness is caused by some sort of disability, often invisible, mental, physical. But, that is, something that's, I think there's an opportunity there as well. I don't like to always just see what's wrong there. And I do think that the government has a part to play, but I think we all have a part to play. Government is for the people, by the people, of the people. So we don't have to be a leader of a country. We can just be a leader in your community.
That's absolutely right.
And that's what you've done here. That's literally what you've done here just tonight. It's amazing, the kind of work, to be able to see that personally in my life, my brother being able to play Xbox with me pre-accident and then post-accident again. You touch lives of people that you don't know yet, that in so many ways that I know they don't know who you are. It may not always know who you are, but they should know who you are. And it's amazing. Thank you for doing all the work you've done. It's fantastic. People like you make the world a better place for everybody.
I appreciate that. And I do want to close on one really important comment. There were lots of people who were here before I ever got here. And there's this with Makers Making Change doesn't happen without the team that is working across the country and all the volunteers and the people who started the program before I even arrived. I think that, this is not a one person solution. This is, we're all part of the journey. And I think it's important to recognize just how broad that scope actually is.
No, definitely. The society itself have done so much thing as a community for us, for disabled. And, if I look it up from just making, as we go back to our topic, like how we met each other from my Toyota car key, which is a lot of people think that it's nothing. But for me, that is a change for me, because I can start my car. I don't have to worry about it, how I'm going to get assisted for it and everything. So I think so the society, the Square Society and yourself, engineers, and I really wish a lot more engineers, a lot more software engineers to come in and join your group so that we can have more assistive technology into our market for us, much more in affordable ways to it. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you so much.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this today. Love, obviously, the topic, and really appreciate the questions. It's been a lot of fun.
I know you brought a lot more stuff than what's on the table here. If you can maybe show us some of the stuff that you and your team at Neil Square and Makers Making Change have created, it'd be great for the audience to see.
Sure. I think, this is a portion that would sort of tie into the Xbox adaptive controller. Get this in sheer, maybe a little bit better. And the idea behind this is a lap trace. So if we have our standard Xbox controller here, and we use two hands very closely on the controller, but if I have difficulty holding on to it or pressing, or maybe I don't have the strength to move all these buttons together, how then do I want to game with this number of inputs? Like, I think there's something like 16 buttons and a couple of joysticks on this one controller. Well, we've now taken that and said, well, what if we position these around a user in a way that works better for them? So we can move a joystick, different spots on this little lap tray. We have different ways. Maybe we've mounted things around rails or on, wheelchair arms, for example, as well. So a person, maybe they don't bring their hands together, but then we can have inputs on both sides of their body that work well for them now. So there's a lot of different creative types of solutions that are possible. This is one that's been very popular, a very inexpensive lap tray, a little bit of Velcro, some of the assistive switches all packaged together that then get plugged into the back of our Xbox adaptive controller. And now we have a gaming setup that I can just utilize the best way possible. Maybe there's only 2 buttons and a joystick, and up from there. So it's a very, I think that's a big part of what we try to solve is what is the solution versus what is the technology. And that's, we're realizing more and more to put additional effort in those resources to help guide people to that solutions thinking in the process of technology development.
Yeah. Go ahead. If you have other stuff to show us, I'd love to. Yeah. Because we have an international audience. Not everybody has access to this stuff in their countries, right?
I'll take the sticky note off of Violet here. So international audience, great segue, because this is our en français version of this toy. So Violet is an adapted toy, and there's a bunch of different little buttons that you can see on the paws here. And those can be very difficult for kiddos to reach out and grab. So what we've done is we've worked with our volunteers. We actually open up the toy and we teach people how to rewire these things. And then we put in a bunch of jacks for assistive switches. So something like our big button here, which is very easy to press, we can plug it into Violet. And now all of a sudden we have our toy. We're playing with our toy again, kind of getting back to the idea of action and reaction, but we're playing with the toy, right? So if we have a 3-4-year-old, they want to play with these toys. It's a really magical moment. All of a sudden they have the ability to independently interact with this toy that they've been looking at.
Yeah.
And what are the costs for them to buy it?
So this is, get it at any box store that you want. We're not creating a special toy in the process of doing this. And the costs are literally the components required to change the device. So it's a few dollars of electronics.
Wow. And please go ahead. If there's more, we would rather see it.
Sure. I'll go back kind of to the idea here of some of the simpler devices. So what this is a gas cap opener. So if I have my cart and I have a hard time reaching in or pinching the gas cap and opening it up as I need to refuel my tank, I have a much bigger handle. I can put this over the gas cap and I can just loosen it off. So maybe, again, for someone who has some arthritis in your fingers, or there's some mobility in that ability to pinch and hold with strength, this is just an easy way now to get access to your gas cap. And again, this is, under $5 worth of plastic that have been printed and assembled by volunteers. It's, some very simple ideas of, in the same vein, we have our nail clipper holders. So this idea here is that, if I, again, have limited at that pinch strength, I can utilize my forearm to actually clip my fingernails independently. So I don't need to have those really fine motor control with my fingers in order to still utilize. This has actually been a really popular device. And again, very, very simple in concept, which is one of the things I really find beautiful in design is something that is very simple can have such impact. It doesn't have to be this complex whiz-bang piece of electronics. Sometimes it needs to be that, but it doesn't have to be that crazy technical to be really, really valuable.
Yeah, just go ahead. Like, I see a bag full of goodies here. I'd rather see it. You brought it with you anyway.
Let's keep going. We got a few different ideas here. So I think we already talked about that one. So we've got, again, a few more. I brought mostly kind of on the aids for daily living, or, just general handy tools. This is a bag holder. So I want to carry a bunch of grocery bags with one hand. I can hang a few off the loop, and, much easier handle to hold on to than those little grocery bag handles. And it's just so much more comfortable and convenient.
Talk about, that's universal design right there.
Yeah.
Like everybody should have.
It's really convenient to use. I mean, we hung, I think it was 8, the big milk jugs off of it to test it for strength, no problem. And
in plastic bags.
In plastic bags, yeah. And
wow.
You don't, that's heavy. You don't need to do that, but it is the idea that it's strong.
Yeah.
And it's comfortable. Like, it's actually much more comfortable to hold on to than other things. And it just makes that whole job.
Is there a name for this? What do you call that?
This is our bag carrier, very creative name. But yeah, we just call it our bag carrier. You can download the 3D file on our website and print it on your printer or your library. It's very, pretty easy to get to. Same idea with this one. And again, another very simple 3D printed device. This is just adding a little bit extra levering force. You can squeeze the top of your water bottle and just open it up with a little bit stronger. Bring a water bottle.
Oh, I see. Okay, but
the bottle cap would go in the middle there, and then we just use this as a handle essentially to unscrew our some of those tough water bottles to open up.
Right.
Car key turner. We did the car key turner. But I've got the key turner. This is one for your basic flat keys. And the idea, again, is if I have a hard time with that pinching, or I find it painful or uncomfortable, I can now put my fingers through a loop, and not only can I open the door, I can actually use it as the handle. So I can open the door one-handed. So it's actually just a very, again, 50 cents of plastic to create that opportunity.
Wow.
So there's a bunch of these ideas. We have about 233 different devices published on our website today. So there's a lot of variety of options. Some are very high tech, like the lip sync. Some are very low tech, like these very, one print parts, and everything kind of in between that as well. They're really focused on problems that people have brought forward to us and said, hey, I think that this can be made easier. And we look at it, say, that's great. And we really focus on how could we do this in a way that affects the most people possible. So we do tend to stay away from custom solutions, but we like working with a user who can help guide our design process so that it is usable, and we get that really valuable user input to the design process very early on. And then we publish it out so that a lot of people can benefit from that work. Because while it works for one person, most of the time, it probably works for somebody else too. And that's, again, the genesis of this idea.
You know what this reminds me of? Have you ever seen a James Bond movie? Yeah, I know you have, because we love watching them. And then when James Bond goes over to Q or somebody, whoever that's the tech guy, and then he starts showing off all the tech, James Bond starts playing with it and crashes the car, or doesn't crash the car, is about to crash the car, never messes up anything. Q, I think it was Cube, right?
Yeah.
You were like,
Kyle, our team did. Yeah, definitely got some fun things. I'm going to show the fish here is a little bit different. Again, a very simple 3D printed part. This is a little puzzle designed to be taken apart and put together, but this is really targeted at kiddos with low vision or blindness. And there's little braille bumps on each piece of this fish. And as you put it together, it spells fish. But it's both a toy for, puzzle toy, but you also get to train a little bit. And again, it's really easy to 3D print something like that.
keep going. Keep on, Justin. If you're tapped out, then that's fine. But
Start repeating a lot of the same kinds of things we've kind of covered.
I know I did see one though. There was some lighting thing. Yeah,
This is, we think of our toys, whether it's Violet or our light wand here. This is just another adapted toy. So what we've done is gone in with a volunteer and rewired the inside of the circuit and created this little tail. So you can now plug a switch in. So I can take my big switch here, and I can just plug it in, and now I can press this button, and now I have this visual interactive experience with this kind of fun lamp. So it's just a different way of...
So really anything, I guess, that's got some sort of a switching mechanism. So you could actually even maybe make this wireless. You could have a Bluetooth dongle at some point, or a wireless.
Yeah, there's some stuff we've done with wireless switch trigger. A little more expensive as you get more, down some of these paths with electronics. This is obviously the cheapest kind of setup with a wire into a switch, but obviously there's other ways we can do that, of course. So yeah, so if you want bigger distances, you don't want the wires getting in the way. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I've experienced that with Amit sometimes when he's in his room and he's maybe woken up in the middle of the night, and now he doesn't have someone around to help him in his bed or do something around the house. You could have some sort of wireless switches that can obviously the light switches are all kind of has moved on in that direction now. You can easily get smart switches for that kind of stuff, but there may be other things that you would want, like turn the kettle on, right? Right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of home automation is really where you're getting into now, and that moves a little bit away from what the gap or the niche we fill with Makers Making Change. And there's a lot of those home automation products that are really robust and certified with CSA for the electronics to plug into your wall and all that kind of stuff, which is where we stay away. But here in BC, another great partner organization that we do a lot of work with is Technology for Living, and that's really their sweet spot. Is they've got a lot of people who are really well versed in home automation, and they're here to help. So it's a really neat organization. That's Technology for Organization. Ian Price, Tetra is another great organization. Again, very similar space. We work well together as well. We've had a lot of interactions over the years with the Tetra teams and our Makers Making Change team, for example, and a lot of...
Does the big guys are shy from you, or they are very cooperative with you? For example, in the IT big world, now Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, and they all are running for accessibility world. And so are they shy from you, or they really want to come and collaborate?
There's a lot of collaboration, actually. I think that's really important to make a note of, and a great question. A lot of the organizations, again, it depends on the organization. So there isn't sort of like one answer to your question. I think it's a spectrum again, but we've had folks from Nintendo reach out to us out of the blue and say, hey, we want to talk to you about this idea of accessibility. We hear you're the people to talk to. Or, Microsoft, we've had a relationship with their team, Bryce Johnson in particular, for a long time. Not myself quite as much, but Chad on our team is, when this whole thing started with Makers Making Change, they were very close and working together again around the Xbox controller, and then generally around accessibility and technology from that point all the way to today. And you kind of name it. It just depends when the organization is really thinking about it, if they've heard about us, if we've approached them or not. There's a lot of ways people find each other. It's a busy world. So when the timing is right and it comes together, I would say there's generally the desire to collaborate more than anything else.
Thank you for listening.
Please leave a review and follow our socials.
For more information, go to the show notes of this episode.
We'll see you soon on the next episode of the Living Unbroken podcast.